Good morning and good evening to the odd few out there who it is actually evening. Welcome, William.
Boy, howdy.
Thanks for joining me again. I missed number two, but
Hold it if
don't
you need to
worry.
make a number two real quick. Oh,
Not that
you meant
number
the
two.
second episode. Yes. Yes, you did.
I've caught up offline, so I should be right to go from. Is it lesson three? I guess they're lectures,
It's
aren't
actually
they?
lesson we're on lesson 4 actually. Because we doubled up on the first one, we did a single one on the second one, and now we're on the fourth one, the fourth hour.
Cool. And I have to say, I'm finding it absolutely fascinating. Um, I was concerned it might be a little boring, but I haven't found that at all. And in fact, I'm surprised that more Americans aren't interested in learning
Exactly what I was going to
about the
say.
Constitution.
It's refreshing to see somebody, especially from another country, but somebody interested at all. I can't get Americans to pay attention to it. They always talk about their rights, but they don't know the difference between rights and privileges.
Mm, that's right. I think um, they think that privileges are rights. They understand rights, but they don't understand privileges. They think privileges are also rights,
Yes.
um, and that's the issue. Whereas, um, and I have to wonder something we'll look into eventually when we get there, but has piqued my interest even more in constitutions is how Australia is basically set up the same way, except that they didn't list a Bill of Rights so that it wouldn't be restricted to just the rights that are listed, so that list can grow essentially. Um,
Look forward to your Australian Constitution episode.
mm, well, I'll be fascinated to see. I have a feeling there's going to be some rights that are possibly privileges that we've made rights. So that'll be interesting when we get there. But for now, share Michael Badnarik. Is that how you say it? Badnarik? Badnarik?
Badnarik. Yeah. Badnarik's Law.
And so I was thinking this last episode, someone, actually, a few people have mentioned that they dismiss him essentially because he's not learned or qualified or certified, I guess,
Motherfucker
in
ran for president.
this field. But um, I mean, when you can clearly see the handle he's got on it, the understanding he has, I don't, what would someone want him to have studied? Politics, sociology, civics? I mean, it's the Constitution. Where there's no degree, or is there a degree there's probably constitutional law,
Right. There's
but that's
constitutional
going
law, but
down
it's
the
it's all
lines of
based
lawyers.
it's all based on the same fucking document and the same Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers.
Mm,
The founders wrote their exact intent, both sides of the argument, right there for us to look at, and he's done the time and research to do that. So, it's more than most Americans do, for damn sure.
yeah, well, and I have to say, all I've heard is um, that, like, people, I guess, trying to poison the well, or give him a bad name, but I've not heard anyone argue against any of his statements or arguments. So the way he's so far been describing the Constitution, I'm interested if any of those people who think he's some sort of right-wing extremist or whatnot, which of his values or views or the way he sees the Constitution is wrong. That's what I want to know. Present me an argument rather than just bagging the dude out. And before we press play, I'll just say g'day to everyone out there. We got DT. We have Q. We stole his stream time, apparently. You stole ours. We have Let's Farm. Good morning, Let's. Planning to watch for the Donald Trump town hall next Wednesday. Should be fun. Yeah. Silver Wolf. Rex, and I think that's it.
Yeah, and they're wishing you a happy belated birthday.
Oh, thank you.
You think maybe at the end of this you could show people what you were up to? It's up to you.
Yeah, I might. That's not a bad idea, actually.
Do
a little bit of a birthday bash.
And we'll call it dessert.
Yeah. I like that.
But now for the meat and potatoes.
Exactly, Cryptomaria. It was just another day. I think most people who know me knew Bub had her surgery today, but what most people don't know is that Harrison also had to get a halter put on for 24 hours because his heart has been sitting at 250 for like up to 8-10 minutes at a time. Yeah, no. He has always had an ectopic heartbeat, but it's never been, well, that we've noticed, it's never been so fast. So, yeah, that happened today as well. Good fun.
Well, so that's why I didn't for you, man.
That's why I didn't really have a birthday. Was the reason for saying that. So I'll probably have some sort of birthday bash on the weekend or something. Do a big long stream, get pissed, say some shit I regret saying publicly because I'm so drunk.
Oh, do it on a stream.
Oh, absolutely. It's the only way. So it's sort of my birthday tradition, actually. Last birthday, I was I had background, like I had a board set up with pictures on it and shit. I was so drunk, I just stood up and fell into that, destroyed my background. Yeah, good times. But without further ado, enough about me. Let's hear from Michael. So this is class 4 of 7. So we're just doing the 7
of this. I have a second one of him. Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Oh, you would need a second opinion, so I have another one set up for whenever we finish this. That way we can compare the two law experts there.
Yeah, nice. And I'm just trying to jog my memory where we sort of left off.
Just jump in, man.
I think it was... No, fuck it. Just jump in, eh? Here we go. Hold your breath.
Yeah, we're gonna.
You can run it on 1.25. The speed, I mean, 1.25 is probably better. You spaz.
Seem to have lost. There it is. It's like, what the fuck?
I'll have a bowl with you then.
Well, you'll have to catch up.
I'm working on it.
We are talking about the Constitution in general. When we left, we were talking about Article 2 in particular. What does Article 2 discuss? What branch of government? The executive. Everything that has to do with...
That's right. So we were talking about things that the you've got the Senate. No. What
You're talking about the three branches? We have the
Yeah.
executive, the
Yeah,
judicial,
which is
and the legislative.
now who's in the legislative? You've got the
It's
what do you call that?
Congress and the House of
Congress.
Congress and the Senate.
And the Senate. That's right. So it was talking about what the Congress can rule on
That's
constitutionally. And it's very specific, and there's a reason that they put it in the Constitution and made it specific. And for example, general well-being as opposed to specific well-being. So, you know, doing anything to do with Medicare or Obamacare or whatever you call it is out of their purview. That would be unconstitutional. But yet,
correct.
They're voting on these sorts of things all the time.
That's correct. All the time. We can't get them to go home.
Yeah, that's right. And it was like they have to meet at least once a year.
Once a year. And they're there every fucking day trying to justify their existence.
Less 2 weeks a year they have off or something. So.
Yeah, they're writing laws. That tells you they're compounding laws. They're constantly writing more rules.
Yeah.
They need to fucking go home. We need to figure out what we've done with these last 100 years of rules. Figure out where the fuck we've gone sideways. But that's my opinion.
Needs a bit of a shake-up, doesn't it? The whole system.
I think it's coming.
The president and vice president. And we had just finished up with the oath. The oath of office for president is actually listed in the Constitution. Right? Now, the president can be impeached.
Yeah, it's their duty to protect
the Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic. Which means,
and if they don't, it's treason.
Violating your oath of office, you can be charged with treason.
So essentially, by allowing America to get further and further away from the Constitution, every president is kind of guilty.
The one that's just going along. It's not just the president; it's Congress. It's all of them that are just going along against their oath of office because they worry about their job, they worry about getting voted for, so they will sign their names to all types of unconstitutional shit and never even question whether it's right to do.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. Do you think they even know that the shit they do is unconstitutional?
I think they have a very superficial view of the Constitution. I think that they resent the limitations that it places on them, and they like to step around it as often as we don't catch it.
And that's because it's so different to anything else in the world. Then it's like they desperately want it to be a democracy. But that's not how yous were set up.
Right. They're trying to use a democracy idea to overthrow the republic.
And I don't know if I got an answer. Do your political parties name themselves because of their sort of leanings, like the Republicans, push that it's a republic, whereas it seems like the Democratic Party want a democracy.
I mean, those are very old parties, and the ideas that that they held at that time. I mean, that may be why, but I mean, the Republicans and the Democrats are both evolved animals from what they were then.
Yeah.
I mean, necessarily a good evolution, though. I mean,
they've
become
even
more dangerous.
sort of swapped positions on certain things too, I believe.
Maybe. Yeah, I guess so. I think it's just everything the things that we considered before as being liberal or left leaning are now by the new left considered far right.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything right of Marx is somehow conservative now.
Yeah. It's gone so far.
For treason, bribery, high crimes, and other misdemeanors. Right? Now, one of the things that the presidents throughout history have been doing is they have been writing executive orders. Now, the first president to ever write an executive order was George Washington. Now, an executive order is for the people who work for him at the White House. It's like order more paper clips, no starch. That's an executive order. Right? Since then, presidents have been using executive orders for a whole lot more than that. Now, let's just pick on Bill Clinton because he's an easy target. Bill Clinton signed a total of 357 executive orders while he was president.
Executive orders.
Now, these executive orders basically give some form of absolute authority to one of the federal agencies.
So, I know what they are, but are they? Is he saying they're often unconstitutional?
Often unconstitutional because they're creating or kind of like manifesting a new power, a new agency, a new overreach, and they're not. If they were constitutional, they'd be voted on and shit like that normally. This is the president saying I can do this, but again, it's just one man or one regime's opinion of what they want done, their wishes. They're not binding to the American people, but Americans don't know that.
And isn't it a case of, in general, there's been the odd outlier, but in general, each successive president has had more executive orders. And I believe Joe Biden has blown the record out of the water. He had done the most within the first couple months, I think, of his presidency.
Slowed down though. He slowed down a lot. He had an agenda to undo everything that Trump did, and that was the first thing he did when he got in. He kept the promises to the people that wanted that shit undone. So I get why he did it, but he had to do it with an executive order. He had to pull that shit up quick and move on. But then he's got his own executive orders and things that he's doing. Obama did. I mean, Bush did. The whole point is once they got a taste for these executive orders back in the day, it's just kind of like this power of rulership that never is diminished. It continues to grow.
It's like you give this democratically chosen leader this little bit of autonomy where he can essentially be a tyrant.
Just human nature. That's the power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. It doesn't matter what government system it is. Whenever you start having people consider themselves authorities, they're going to want to expand that authority.
Yeah.
People have to slap their hands when they reach shit.
Yeah. And can they only undo other executive orders? Like the president can't come in and
let him continue to talk about it because I don't want to
he'll
speak out of
explain
turn.
that. Okay,
I hope so.
Agencies in time of national emergency. So if there is a national emergency, FEMA is going to go in and take care of all the hospitals and stuff. In a time of national emergency, your Energy Commission is going to go in, and they're going to take complete and total control over power generation. And other agencies are going to go in and take over complete control of transportation. The FCC, I mean, you guys don't do radio stations, but in every radio station, in all their radio, electronic setup, they've got a chassis built into the system where the FCC can automatically, by remote control, take over the radio station. So you could be doing the wild 50s music or whatever, and suddenly they send out a radio signal and they are broadcasting and you're not. Isn't that great that the federal government can take over what goes out over the airwaves? Now, I've got on page 15 of your handout, I have a list of which executive orders Bill Clinton signed in which year. Notice that in 2001, and he left office January 21st, in 3 weeks before he left, he still signed 3 executive orders. Now, Paul Begala, his advisor, has been quoted. He's been on TV saying, stroke of the pen, law of the land. Kind of cool, huh? Well, yeah, I suppose if you're the king. It was a monarchy when the king would sign a proclamation and make it law. If Bill Clinton does that, doesn't Bill Clinton bypass Congress? What happens to our series of checks and balances? Just thumbing their nose at it. So I don't care who Bill Clinton was sleeping with. If Hillary doesn't care, why should I care? It's not hurting my feelings. But I'm a little bit irritated with the 357 executive orders that he signed. Each one of those, as far as I'm concerned, he should be locked up for treason. Now, back on page 49, I believe, of your...
Muted.
Oh, so just to make sure I didn't misunderstand, he said that they're meant to be used in like times of emergency.
Yeah, like
Fucking
hurricanes, wars, things like that. But even during wartime, no provision, no right of that's in the Constitution or Bill of Rights can be abridged. That means that even in the worst emergencies, like I don't know, a pandemic, people's rights are still not anything that can be voted on or executive orders written to abridge or infringe on. So there is no justification in the Constitution for an emergency executive order that takes away rights.
Do you think, just a simple, quick answer that could, obviously has nuance and whatnot, but that hearing him say, in a national emergency, FEMA takes care of the hospitals, this mob takes care of that. That sounds pretty fucking scary. When you think about it, in those situations, we're going to lose basically all rights, and these people are going to come in and tell us what we have to do. Could that be solved by having members of the community volunteer for committees for those roles? So the shit hits the fan, you get a whole bunch of nurses and healthcare workers to volunteer to be in that committee.
We have FEMA. We have another agency created for shit hits the fan, and they're under the Department of Homeland Security, which even has an emergency constitution, which really is not a constitution at all. It's just basically how to declare a soft martial law when necessary.
Yeah, exactly.
Which would be totally unconstitutional. So why is there even an agency that has this outline?
Exactly. Why wouldn't it be members of the community? That's going to ensure we're working together, not just pointing a gun at you and saying, "Get in the cage."
Well, that's why we have the state governments, we have the county governments and districts and stuff like that. So we have different levels of government, from the individual upwards. And
Yeah,
so it takes a lot to get everybody to fucking sell out at the same time. But over
yeah,
a long period of time, bribing people and changing the culture within Congress and within the government, that they're taking bribes and they're playing teams and all this shit. Well, then over time you're just going to erode the foundational structure.
yeah. I see. All right, continuing on.
Handout is a list of web pages. And these are web links that you can go to study a lot of these particular executive orders. Don't take my word for any of this stuff. Go out and do your own research. Read the executive order for yourself. And I've got summaries down there. 11490 assigns emergency preparedness functions to federal departments and agencies. 10997, emergency preparedness functions to the Secretary of Interior. Emergency preparedness functions to the Secretary of Agriculture. But what type of emergency can you have in agriculture?
Diseases and shit. We've had them like swine flu and foot and mouth disease and shit.
Right, but what they do is they use that to claim through the Bureau of Land Management and the FDA. They will. That's the Food and Drug Administration. They will take land and shut down competitive farmers and small farmers, and on the idea that they're breaking rules or that there could be some sort of problem, even when there's not. I mean, they actually work for lobbyists for big agro to shut down smaller farms, like competition.
So it comes back. Oh, sorry.
Just saying, it's that whole cronyism. The big corporations fund the politicians, and they shut down the competition of those big corporations by stretching out the arms of the government and petting a little too hard.
Yeah. So it keeps coming back to what I feel is the core of the Constitution, which is the balancing act between the government preventing us doing things to protect our rights, as opposed to us taking responsibility and paying the consequences after we do the act.
But just remember, the whole point of government is to protect and defend individual rights. Like that is the original. So everything that they're creating that infringes on that's repugnant to the Constitution,
which is nearly every fucking law or legislation that prevents you doing something or requires you to be licensed or certified because there's a possible danger or you could possibly do the wrong thing.
Like you and I've looked at
as opposed to let us have the freedom. If we then do the wrong thing, then we have the responsibility of the consequence.
Yes, that's it.
But you cannot legislate to stop. So the example right from the first episode was burning my house down. I would go to jail if I burnt my own fucking property.
If you had insurance on it, and you tried to collect on it.
No.
Oh, you mean in Australia?
That would be endangering.
Well, it would be here. It would be here too if there was endangering, like if you were close to someone else's house or something like that. But you have to be responsible. It's not illegal for you to destroy your own property. Okay, just go back to the idea of a chair. If you've got a chair It's your chair. You can sit on it or you can throw it in the fire.
This is my point, though. That's the thin end of the wedge. It's no, I legally can't set fire to a house, any house. Like there's legislation around burning houses down, right? You need the fire brigade there to do it. Even if I'm out in the middle of nowhere. Now that is impinging on my rights because I may cause trouble. I may set fire to something else. I may injure someone. So they put legislation there where it should be no, especially if I'm out in the middle of nowhere. I should be able to burn the fucking house down. And if nothing happens, nothing happens and I don't hear from anyone. If I hurt someone, then I pay the price. But it starts with big things like people go, of course you shouldn't be able to burn a house down. It's dangerous.
Well, Sammy,
one of the things what's next?
One of the things we teach our kids here is, well, we used to, is every right has an attached responsibility. You can't have a right without a responsibility or a responsibility without a right.
What was that German guy who said
Bonhoeffer?
Yes. I think he said readiness doesn't come from thoughts. Something doesn't come from thoughts, but a readiness for responsibility.
At the end of this, maybe you can tack on next to your dessert an extra dessert by playing your Bonhoeffer video.
I think we might have to, because
better make notes on what you want to do, because the more we smoke, the less likely that any of this is going to get done.
You're right.
You know how we do.
So Bonhoeffer. Okay. But yeah, I don't know how convoluted I was or if I was clear at all, but yeah, basically telling me I can't have a fire over a certain size without getting a permit is the government overreaching its responsibilities.
Now, you are a grown man.
It's protecting the people I haven't harmed yet.
Right, but listen, you're a responsible grown man, Sammy. So if you did decide to burn your house down, do you think that you would take advantage of the government's willingness to put out that fire, or at least to supervise it and make sure everything's safe by calling them, letting them know that you're going to burn it?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, that's because you're balancing your rights and responsibilities, and you're taking advantage of the privilege of using the fire brigade because it's there to protect you and other people. So that's where you're using government as appropriate and proper, because they're happy to defend the rights of other people by putting out your fire if it starts to burn their property.
But see, now here's the difference of, I think I should be able to utilize the fire department, especially if I'm paying taxes, right? If I want a fire, to protect me and my property, not to protect some potential victim. That's the part
let the damage happen and then pay for it.
Exactly.
Now, this gets complicated when we talk about drunk driving, though. When we get into that area, that gets a little more, because you want to stop somebody before they, hurt someone. So as we get into this, I'm sure we'll come up with lots of different reasons that some government is necessary. It's some overreach.
Exactly. But it's about trying to minimize it.
Exactly. Precisely that word.
Not meet every day bar 2 weeks and, keep instilling new laws constantly. Laws on laws on laws on laws.
I love you, Sammy. I do. But this is a 58-minute video and we're 5 minutes in.
Shit. It is. I'll shut up now.
And down at 11,002, emergency preparedness functions to the post.
Mate, people can't say I'm not thorough.
No, you're
Yeah,
diving
General, what's
all
he
the
gonna
way
do?
in.
Absolutely. Balls deep.
Like stamps
Nuts
around?
hanging out.
Why do all these things have emergency preparedness in common? They all deal with some national emergency. Guess who gets to decide whether or not there's a national emergency? The president. So with the stroke of a pen, suddenly you can have martial law overnight. No. This is the United
See what I mean about he can be a fucking dictator? Like, you have written into your fucking law that he can declare an emergency, that activates his executive fucking powers, which I obviously don't even do that anymore, because what the fuck was the emergency that Biden used?
No, the same emergency has gone on since the Civil War. And Reconstruction is apparently still happening. You'll see. We'll get to it, Bo. We'll get to it.
The United States. That only happens in, Angola and Russia and all those other places. Yeah? And when the army tanks come rolling down your street, you're going to be going, oh gosh, I didn't think it could happen here.
The national emergency is not defined either.
National emergency is not defined anywhere. It's basically up to the discretion of the president. Oh, well, I feel a whole lot better. I trust the president. They were talking about Executive Order 12-919, which was signed June 3rd of 1994, not too long ago. And this executive order was written by Bill Clinton, released to the public, and just recently became law in 1998. It is an order that consolidates many previous executive orders into one sweeping executive order. Why have all these little tiny ones? We'll just bundle them all up into one sweeping order. And it says, quote, and in view of the existing national emergency declared by Proclamation 2914 of December 16, 1950. Yeah, what was that national emergency?
What page are you on?
This is page 15. We're on page 15 of the handout. So in 1950, we had some sort of a national emergency, and Bill Clinton is writing this order because of the existing national emergency. Did you feel like you were in some sort of national emergency in 1994?
Yeah, we don't like it.
Yeah, right.
They don't. They just have
Right,
to.
literally like it.
The point is, they just have to declare the national emergency. They don't have to tell anybody about it. So we're finished with Article 2. Let's go to Article 3 of the Constitution. Now, let me show you the Constitution. How many
Did the fuck are you doing?
How many articles does the Constitution have? 7. 7 articles. The first 3, legislative, executive, and judicial. So let's look at Article 1. It fills up all of the first page and almost all of the second page. I mean, and these are large pages. There's a lot of stuff in Article 1 for Congress. Then we start Article 2 down in the bottom and finish up Article 2 on this next page. So it's not quite a full page for Article 2 for the president.
Muted.
If he ends up showing how the Supreme Court also does stuff that's unconstitutional, that's 3 for 3. That's your entire fucking...
I don't think we've got to the Supreme Court yet, but they're supposed to judge things based on constitutionality, and if they overturn something that they've already ruled on, like Roe versus Wade, what they're essentially doing is saying that the previous Supreme Court overlooked, some constitutional aspect, some infringement that was there, like the life of the child.
Yeah. Well, because he said this is Article 3, and then he said the first 3 articles is executive. What's the other one that's not judicial? Legislative. And then number
Good at
3
this.
is judicial. So,
It's judicial, legislative, and executive. Yep.
which I'm guessing the judicial is your Supreme Courts, right?
That would be the top of the judicial. That's as what that's as high as the judicial court that you can get to.
Isn't it only Supreme Courts that can affect changes in laws? Or can that happen at any level?
It's on whether it's a state law, a federal law, a city law, a city ordinance. There's lots of different complications.
So is the Supreme Court essentially just meant to decide whether
The
a thing is
constitutionality.
constitutional?
Yep.
Okay.
They take on constitutional challenges. That's what they're supposed to do.
Okay. I'm clear now.
Article 3, I mean, it's like less than a third of a page. There's not a whole lot there. Well, what is the Constitution? The Constitution is supposed to be the chains of the Constitution. It's supposed to put limitations on government. Which branch of government has the fewest chains? The judicial. Which one do you think is most hazardous to your liberty? Now, open up your book on the Constitution to page 31. You'll see the beginning of Article 3. It says, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court. All right, that's good. Now down to the 4th and 5th line. The judges of both the Supreme and inferior courts shall hold their offices during good behavior. What does that mean? They just have to comb their hair and brush their teeth before they show up? What does it mean that they are elected for good behavior? It's life term. Once you're elected, you have to die or quit before you're out. You get elected once, and unless we impeach you for treason, you are there for life.
So when I see your presidents choose people, select people for the Supreme Court, because the president chooses, doesn't he?
Well, that's complicated too. There's times when the sitting president can select someone. There's a lot of review that goes on, but they can appoint people. But that's if one of the judges passes away during that president's term, if I'm not mistaken.
And yet they don't necessarily have to be even a judge, let alone really knowledgeable about the Constitution.
Judges are pretty knowledgeable. The judges are pretty knowledgeable about it. The magistrates maybe not, but the judges are pretty constitutionally savvy. They may not operate within the Constitution, and we'll get into statutes and color of law stuff. But as far as an actual judge, they're versed on the Constitution, and when called to do so, they can deal with it.
And what's the difference between a judge and a magistrate?
Magistrates hear lower level offenses, much more local kind of shit.
Okay, yep. So more like civil and shit.
Whenever we're done with this, though, I think Pixie wants to come in here and beat the shit out of both of us.
Mm. Why judicial review became the thing too. Interesting.
She must like this subject.
What was my question? Did you answer it? I can't remember.
I don't know. This is tricky shit. Magistrates.
Oh, yeah, and just how, I don't know, I was watching when Trump was selected, that woman, and she just didn't seem like that intelligent when it came to the Constitution, especially.
We'll have to discuss that later, but I don't want to get
Another time.
to party politics either. Yeah, we're not making a lot of progress.
That's why everybody wants to be a Supreme Court judge. You know, basically you don't have to worry about going up for election anymore. Why are we always worried about who we vote for in the popular election for president? Not that it means anything.
Because you don't know who that appointed.
Because the president of the United States is the guy that appoints Supreme Court judges. Imagine Al Gore being president, and who is he going to appoint as a Supreme Court judge? And then you got that judge until that judge dies. That's why everybody's so worried about who the next president is, not because we give it 2 cents about what he is, but who he's going to appoint. We're going to be stuck with that person for life. Now, let us go to the bottom of page 31. This is the beginning of section 2. It says, the judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity. What does that mean? In law and equity.
Constitution
And contract.
Muted.
Okay, I was just thinking Clockwork Rex. I see. So as soon as you're arrested, a magistrate who you'll see straight up that says, yeah, you go to jail until you
Magistrates aren't always interested in the Constitution. Okay, that's not really. They're interested. They will enforce any statute, law, color of law, anything, because the magistrate's going to make money.
And it's all precedent based, isn't it?
Schedules to crimes and misdemeanors and things like that.
Yeah.
Sounds like it means criminal and civil property. Yeah.
Okay, pretty close. You're on the right track. And then if you flip over to the next page, on page 32, about the, where is it? Okay, about the 4th line. To all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction. Okay. The key is in this last phrase, admiralty and maritime jurisdiction. We have a different jurisdiction. These are the 3 types of law that the Supreme Court has jurisdiction over. We have, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. But that is only common law.
So the Constitution is common law. Is that what he's saying?
Common law, which is the Constitution. In common law, everything is based on property. Surprise! What derives from property? Rights. The Constitution is supposed to protect your rights, and so it's got to be, common law has got to be based on property. So if you run over my mailbox and that's my property, what has to happen? You have to restore my property. Instead of me beating you over the head with a baseball bat, you come over and fix my mailbox. As soon as you fix my mailbox, we're friends again. Right? There are two laws or two aspects to common law. Don't mess with anybody's property and do what you say you're going to do. That is where criminal law and civil law derive from. So I've got criminal cases and civil cases. Again, criminal is based on the violation of property. Civil case is based on a violation of your word. You promised to do something, I was going to pay you, you reneged on the contract, and so I take you to civil law. Now, just briefly, let's flip ahead to the Fifth Amendment. That's going to be on page 44. The Fifth Amendment is on page 44 of your Constitution, and the second to last line, it says, shall not be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. What is due process of law? You get your day in court? Is that due process? If I've got this kangaroo court over here, I'm in West Virginia, and yeah, I've got all my brothers and sisters on the jury. You want to go and sit in my court? Is that due process? No. Due process means that you have common law, equity law, and admiralty law. Those are the three types of law that the Supreme Court is authorized to preside over. And they are different. Just like baseball, football, and basketball are different sports. They're all sports, but they are different sports. You don't stand on a baseball field and go, touchdown. People, what are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. Here, someplace else, that may make perfectly good sense. You have to know what playing field you're on. Now, common law is all based on property. If I haven't damaged any of your property, or you can't show me a contract that I've reneged on, you've got nothing. You can't accuse me of it, or you can accuse me, but you can't put me in jail for anything. Now, what if you're in your car, I'm in my car, and we intersect, unfortunately, out on somebody else's property? Where's the property damage? Did I violate your property, or did you violate my property? Well, it's kind of both at the same time, wasn't it? There's no clear property distinction. I can't say this was my mailbox. There is no defining line, no defining property line. So common law really cannot apply. You can't say this was my property and not yours. That is where equity law comes in. Under equity law, the judge has arbitrary power. The judge can decide what the result of the case is. Equity means fairness. So this is all supposed to be based on fairness. Defined by who? The judge. So, I mean, if you like the judge and you trust him, that may not be so bad. But, you know, if you don't trust the judge, you may be in for a real rude awakening. Now, if it's not going to be in equity court, then you drop down into admiralty court. What does admiralty and maritime make you think of? Water. All right is based on property. If I go out onto the ocean in my boat, who owns the ocean? Nobody. Nobody owns the ocean. There's no property. There's no land. I can say, this is my land, and the land's not going to move. When the tide comes in, the tide goes out, you know, nobody owns the ocean. And so you have a completely different body of law. When I go out onto a sailboat, I've said this several times, I don't know if any of you are sailors, has anybody here heard the expression that the captain's word is law? Okay? It's not a euphemism. It doesn't mean, oh, the old man's just grouchy till he gets a second cup of coffee. It means the captain's word is law. He doesn't have to be right. He just has to be the captain. When he goes out into the ocean in his boat, he has a 40-foot floating country, or however big his boat is. It's his country, and he is a dictator. End of story. He doesn't have to be right. He can throw you in the brig for anything he wants. You have your hair part in the wrong side. Now, if I'm floating out there on the ocean in my boat, and I find another boat, and there's nobody on the boat, who owns it?
Captain.
The captain. This is called, what is this called?
Salvage rights.
Salvage rights. Thank you. It's another senior moment. Okay? It's salvage rights. Finders keepers. I found it and nobody else claimed it. It's mine. End of story. Is that the way we do things on land? No. This is the law of the sea. What is the Constitution? The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, based on property. Common law and admiralty law are supposed to stay apart, just like land and water. Admiralty law is allowed to come up on land as far as the high water mark, originally. Because what is the ocean used for? Do you live there? Heck no. All you use it for is just transporting and shipping goods back and forth. It's used for commerce. So anybody who had a ship out on the ocean, you were selling stuff or taking it somewhere to be sold. Now, when we had the United States is different. We've got the Great Lakes. England doesn't have any Great Lakes. We've got all these rivers that England doesn't have. You can send your ships up and down these rivers inland. Well, gosh, that doesn't make any sense anymore. We can't say law of the sea, so now it is really the law of commerce. It's not so much where you are doing it, is what you are doing. So you've got three bodies of law that the Supreme Court can adjudicate.
I'm not sure what that was in time with. This is getting weird. They can do that in any branch. Do what, DT?
Adjudicate. Common law, equity law, and admiralty law. And they're different, right? Now, are those the only bodies of law? No, those are the only ones that the Constitution acknowledges. So we can have, these are constitutional laws. Anything that is specified by the Constitution is constitutional. Anything which is prohibited by the Constitution is unconstitutional. What if something is not specified but not prohibited by the Constitution? What do we call that?
Administrative.
It's extra constitutional. It's outside the constitutional, but it's not forbidden. One of your rights is the right to contract. You have an unlimited right to contract. Now, if I say, I will pay you $200 to paint the house my dog sleeps in, you go, wow, it's a great deal. I mean, how big is the biggest doghouse you've ever seen? You know, about yay big, $200? Yeah, I can do that in a couple hours. Yeah, I'll do that. You sign the contract. And I walk you around the corner and I show you this, 3-story mansion, 27 rooms. They go, well, this is the house my dog sleeps in. Guess what? You're in deep trouble because you got to paint that house for $200. Was that a good contract? No. Is your right to contract unlimited? Yes. That's why they say read the contract. They're not kidding. Now, that's common law, admiralty, and due process. Like I said, you have a right to common law process. The only time they can move it down is if the distinction of property is not clearly defined. Now, if we move to page 16, okay, Marbury versus Madison is a Supreme Court decision. It is a very important Supreme Court decision. Good.
Well, I can cross Pixie telling me about Madison versus Monroe off the list because he's about to tell us.
And bad. Okay. The good news is that the decision of Marbury versus Madison in 1803 says, certainly all those who have framed written constitutions contemplate them as forming the fundamental and paramount law of the nation. And consequently, the theory of every such government must be that an act of the legislature repugnant to the Constitution is void. If it's unconstitutional, it was never a law to start with. That's
Back
the good
that
news.
section up.
The bad news.
Could you back
is
that up like 30
above
seconds?
that. It says the critical importance of
15, 20, 25, 30.
See this case
the
again.
decision of Marbury versus Madison in 1803 says, certainly all those who have framed written constitutions contemplate them as forming the fundamental and paramount law of the nation. And consequently, the theory of every such government must be that an act of the legislature repugnant to the Constitution is void. If it's
An act of legislation repugnant to the Constitution is void.
Correct. That is it.
unconstitutional, it was never a law to start with.
That's pretty fucking straightforward.
Yeah, it's called the supremacy clause.
isn't it?
Yeah,
Just
they're-
like,
they're-
yeah, go on.
just that's it. The law of the land, the Constitution is the supreme law. If any other law comes into conflict, then it's repugnant and is void. It doesn't exist. You operate
It
as though it
never
was never
was a
written.
law.
Exactly.
Mm.
That's the good news. The bad news is up above that. It says the critical importance of Marbury is the assumption of several powers by the Supreme Court. The assumption of powers. They assume that we can do this. Prior to Marbury versus Madison, who decided what is and is not constitutional? Well, the question never came up. It's not listed in the Constitution. Article 3 is very short. It just says that there is a Supreme Court. It doesn't say what they can or cannot do. And so John Marshall said, well, we're at the Supreme Court. We are going to decide what is or is not constitutional. Okay, everybody just kind of went along with him. They didn't have a better idea. So now, let's pretend, just for a minute, that the Supreme Court decides that the First Amendment does not give you a personal right to freedom of religion. You only have freedom of religion if you are Catholic, Protestant, or Jewish. Is that right? The Supreme Court said so. Does that make it the way things are? No. You have to remember, the Constitution says what the Supreme Court is. The Supreme Court does not get to say what the Constitution is. That would be circular logic. Who decides what is or is not constitutional? We, the people. Who created this thing in the first place? If we decide the Supreme Court is out to lunch, it's up to us to correct it. There's no formal way to do that, but we can amend or abolish the Constitution anytime we see fit. Well, let's rewrite Article 3. So I've just gone over constitutional, unconstitutional, and extra-constitutional. Extra-constitutional is not specified nor prohibited by the Constitution. It is basically just in addition to. Now, there are some ideas that came about because of all this shipping. You're in England, and you ship all your stuff to North America, and all the people buy it and pay you in gold, which is the only thing they would pay you with. And your boat is coming back to the United States, or to England from the United States, with all this gold. What happens if the boat sinks? Well, yeah, salvage rights. Anybody who can get the gold, it's yours. It's laying right down there where the Titanic is going to be. That gold is lost forever and ever and ever and ever, for all intents and purposes. So what they did was they set up insurance companies where you had limited liability. You have several shipping companies, and if my boat sinks, the other shipping companies are going to help me pay for it so that I don't lose everything that I had with that one boat. Now, the bad news is that if one of their boats sinks, I've got to chip in money to help pay for theirs. That's limited liability. Now, in order to have that, you have to have a contract, and only under contract can you compel performance. If the Constitution protects your rights, is there anything there that says you got to come over and cut my grass? Can I force you to cut my grass or do anything for me, without paying you under the Constitution? No. I cannot compel performance unless there's a contract. So basically what they've done is they've set up contract law. Now, these concepts are very, very deep, and I have nearly enough time to cover them. However, I strongly recommend that when you continue your research, you continue your research on the various types of law. And if we flip back to page 16, the second paragraph there, if you want to understand the difference between common law, equity law, and admiralty law, I strongly recommend that you go to the internet, to this ptialaska.net, and read The USA, the Republic is the House that no one lives in. It is a 58-page document that you can download for free. Don't give me, oh man, 58 pages? Oh, that's a lot. Okay, don't read it, and let your liberties go down the toilet. Liberty is not going to be easy. Reading a 58-page document is the least of your worries, and is at the very least that you can do to protect your liberty. And that will give you a very, very clear understanding of the different forms of law and how much of this derives from Roman civil law. where you have no rights. So we want to continue law. This is not all of the law. It's the 3 that are constitutionally specified, but there are other laws. All the laws written by Congress since the Constitution was written are called statutes. Originally, they were organized by date. That was the law that we passed in 1789. That was the law that we passed in 1791. Well, when they weren't passing very many laws, that was easy. And then eventually, it was, gosh, was that the law that we passed on Monday or the one we passed on Tuesday? And then eventually, Monday morning, Monday afternoon, gosh, was that before or after lunch? I just can't remember all these laws we're passing. So they organized them by index. We have 50 titles. Those 50 titles are part of the United States Code. And you can download the United States Code off of the internet. And I give you a website on page 18. Basically at the bottom of page 18, you can download it. The only thing is you've got to download each title by itself. So it's a little bit monotonous, but you get all the information. You can also order a CD-ROM. I think it's about $35, $40. You can get it from the National Archive, and you'll have everything on one CD-ROM. Amazing stuff. I highly recommend it. Now, within the United States Code, there are 2 types of law: positive law and non-positive law. Positive law applies to everybody. The Freedom of Information Act, Title V, that applies to everybody. Black, white, male, female, young, old, doesn't matter. It applies to you. Some of these laws are non-positive law. They don't apply to everybody. Title 27 of the United States Code is alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Now, if you distill alcohol or grow tobacco or build guns, you fall under alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, and you have to pay special taxes. Anybody here distill alcohol, grow tobacco, build guns for a living? Okay. Well, if you don't do any of those things, then Title 27 does not apply to you, and it is non-positive law. It only applies to the people who do those special things. Now, if it is positive law, it says so. You go to Title V, it says, this is positive law, right there at the top. Well, you can go through the 50 titles, flip over to page 18, and I have given you a list of all the positive law titles. These are the laws that you apply to you and absolutely must be followed. Okay? And out of the 50 possible titles, only 22 have been enacted into positive law.
Just quickly, so I found the codes, and they're in years, and then titles, and there's 54 titles.
They've expanded since he did this in 2004 or whenever it was.
Let's have a look at 94. 50. So there's 4 more.
Just keep making more laws, don't they?
Oh.
We'll just bundle them all up into one, switch into one. 19, which was signed June 3rd of 1994, that's not too long ago. And this executive order was written by Bill Clinton, released to the public, and just recently became law in 1998. It is an order that consolidates many previous executive orders into one sweeping executive order. Why have all these little tiny ones? We'll just bundle them all up into one sweeping order. And it says, quote, and in view of the existing national emergency declared by proclamation 2914 of December 16, 1950.
Buddy.
Yeah.
Now, what was that national emergency?
Yeah.
What's going on here?
What's happened?
I don't know. I think that we're watching us doing this. I think you clicked on the stream, your stream.
Oh.
Because we're there on the Oh, and it sounds
Yeah.
very familiar. Yeah, I think you jumped off the video that we were on. As
So where did that go? Oh, here we are. This tab. Okay.
so gay.
Gay as fuck. Here we are.
law. Can you find Title 27? Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms? No, because it's not positive law. Please find Title 26, Internal Revenue. 23, 28, 26 should fall right in between there someplace. Title 26 is not positive law. It does not apply to everyone. And your question is, who does it apply to? And it's a perfectly valid question. Okay, one that we are going to be asking the IRS here very, very soon. But basically, the people who are liable for income tax are non-resident aliens, foreign corporations, and United States citizens living and working in a foreign country. So if that doesn't describe who you are, then you are not liable to the Title 26 tax code, which is a shock and a surprise to many people, although not in this group. Now, one of the interesting things is that the current federal income tax regulations define gross income to mean all income from whatever source derived, unless excluded by law. So there are some incomes which are not gross income. The regulations explain that the items of income compensation for services make up classes, and then regulations direct the reader to another section which provide classes. A class of gross income may be excluded income, and that leads to a section, and it's very, very convoluted. I mean, they can't just say it in black and white because then you'd know. They've got to go jump from here to there and make it really complicated. But eventually, you find out that this leads to a section where the types of income that are not considered to be exempt, eliminated, or excluded are listed. And the list only includes income from certain types of international and foreign commerce. How many people here are doing international or foreign commerce? I didn't think so. So what you can do, for those of you who are interested in this, you can go to page 52 of the handout. And I have a long list of websites that you can do research in or at, establishing basically what the tax code is, what it says, and I'd like to repeat the 3 rules listed over on the side. Principal American who decides to exercise his or her rights in the face of government should be careful to pay attention to 3 rules. Rule number 1, protect your property. Rule number 2, get educated. Then rule number 3 is take action. Do not do them in the reverse order. The government does not play fair. They do not play nice. If you are going to do this at all, be prepared for the ride of your life, because it's going to take pretty much all of your energy. Now, most of the law here in the United States falls under the Uniform Commercial Code, the UCC. Now, uniform means the same, or, basically everything is alike. What they did in the early 1930s is to take equity law, where the judge has an arbitrary decision, and admiralty law, and combine them together into the UCC, uniform. So the equity and admiralty are now the same. That makes everything a lot more convenient, doesn't it? Convenient for whom? Convenient for you? No, the people who were taking advantage of it. This is Uniform Commercial Code. What does commerce mean?
Trade.
Trade, contract. And code.
Just remind me what equity law is again.
Fairness, anything that doesn't, where it has the meeting of two.
Unfair dismissal from work, or
if there's hard to know whose property it is to decide who has the right, it goes to equity, which is a fairness thing. Figure out what a fair solution is, and that's normally arbitrary based on the judge.
Yeah, okay. That's why I stopped, because he said, when the judge can arbitrarily decide.
Now that uniform commercial code they're talking about is actually pretty important. And I've mentioned that I signed my driver's license agreement in a very particular way, and it involves using the uniform commercial code.
Ah,
Share that with you in private.
yeah. You've told me about it. Now I understand what the code is.
Code is not law necessarily. It's it's convoluted. It's cryptic and it's hard to understand. Now, under common law, the presumption is that you have rights, unless you voluntarily waive them. All of your rights are protected except the ones you give up. Under the Uniform Commercial Code, the opposite is true. Under the Uniform Commercial Code, it is assumed that you have no rights unless you explicitly reserve them. Say, oh, by the way, I've got all my constitutional rights. Oh, by the way, I have freedom of speech. Now, how do you do that? If you are in a Uniform Commercial Code contract, you need to go to Section 1, Clause 207, which is defined on page 19, UCC 1-207, performance or acceptance under reservation of rights. A party who, with explicit reservation of rights, performs or promises performance or assents to performance in a manner demanded or offered by the other party, does not thereby prejudice the rights reserved. Such words as without prejudice or under protest or the like are sufficient. So you just have to say out loud or in writing that you are reserving your rights. Now, why do they have to do that? They have to do that because any body of law, in order to be valid, must have two items: remedy and recourse. Remedy means that you are able to get out of trouble once you get into trouble. So if you're going to put me in jail, if I broke something, I've got to have some way I can fix it. Anybody hear of debtor's prison? Debtor's prison, you owe me money. Well, I'm going to put you in jail until you pay me my money back. You're in jail. How are you going to go out and get any money? Well, that's your problem. Kind of a catch-22, isn't it? And so you just had all the prisons just filling up with all these people who couldn't pay their debt, which is now completely and totally illegal. Now, under, the other option, the other thing that law must have.
So it's illegal to lock people up for debts? Was that a yes?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes.
Wow.
If our entire nation is in debt on a federal level, if we locked people up for debt, then our politicians would be the first to go in, I think, since they've got us trillions in debt. We're operating with debt as a currency.
What about when an organization sells a debt to a debt collector?
You didn't sign an agreement with the debt collector. You only sign an agreement with the person or entity that sold that off. Once they sell it to someone else, you're not obligated. You're not a party to that contract anymore. Someone else is handling it. So that you didn't sign any agreement with that third party. So they're just trying, at that point, there's your sign that they're just trying to squeeze what they can out of you. If they had a legitimate claim, then they would take you to court directly as the plaintiff instead of selling the debt. But debt is not currency, even though we treat it that way. Like, imagine if debt was a currency, Visa and MasterCard would have locked up most of the United States.
But what they then have the right to put a mark on my credit history.
Well, you're going to understand shortly why we can't pay debt, because we can't use constitutional money anymore. That was House Joint Resolution 192, June 5th, 1933. We'll get into that, I promise.
Have is recourse. You have to have some way to stay out of trouble in the first place. You know, it's like, okay, just tell me what I'm going to do so I don't get put in jail overnight in the first place. And that's recourse. And that's what UCC 1-207 is. They've got it all the rules are set up so they win the game. Mostly because we didn't tell you the rules. Is the UCC unconstitutional? No. Is it specified by the Constitution? No. It makes it extra constitutional. It is out there in addition to the Constitution. Do you have a right to sign contracts under the UCC? Yes, your right to contract is unlimited. You can sign any contract you want. You just have to know that you've done it. And they're not telling you. Now, what generally happens under the UCC is something called notice and grace. I have to inform you of what's going on, and I have to give you some time period for you to respond. So I send you a letter. Dear Joe, you owe me $1,000. Love, Mike. And I mail you this letter. You go, $1,000?
Do we call laws social contracts?
Social constructs.
Because I'm
I mean, they are a
thinking-
social contract because you're consenting to be governed by these laws. So, yeah, they would be a social contract.
Now, here's the thing. If they can claim ignorance of a law is not an excuse, then shouldn't it be their responsibility to make sure we know all these laws before we, like, how have we agreed to a contract that we haven't read?
You can't have a contract without full disclosure.
Exactly.
Right. And so it's not even a legitimate contract. It looks like a contract, but if they're not telling you when you sign into it, if they don't explain what's going on, then they didn't fully disclose. You're being misled. But again, you have the unlimited right to contract, and it's buyer beware. You know what you sign contract to, but most people don't recognize when they sign contracts.
Well, that should mean you also have the freedom not to.
Right.
Which we don't.
What, to not contract? Yeah,
to
of
not
course.
Yeah.
No one can force you to put your signature on something.
No. But they can make your life a living hell.
Yes, and they will. They fucking will. They need you to agree without question. But if you, we'll get into conditional acceptances and shit like that after all. We'll get into the more fun stuff when you're interested in it. But like how to answer these things. After, when we go off air, I'll explain to you how I just came out on top with the IRS last month. It's something that we've been fighting for a year. And so there is a way to answer them in staying in honor. But we'll do that privately because I don't want to upset Steve.
I have had this theory, I guess, or hypothesis that I've always told people, and now it's seeming that I understand how it works. Whenever I've had a bill that I felt was unfair, or just anything I didn't agree with, or a debt collector or whatnot, I would always fight it. I've always fought it. And the ratio of you winning is like 9 times out of 10. You'll lose once or twice and have to pay. But if you fight things, like you said, I thought they just didn't want to deal with you, but I think it might be more the case of a lot of these places know that legally they don't have a leg to stand on, and that they're hoping that a debt collector chasing you is going to be scary enough and the fact that every letter the debt collector sends out, the bill goes up $50. So
I always do the opposite. I always, whenever they try to get me to settle for something less, I do something so small that it's not even worth their time. And then they'll be like pushing, high again, and I'll add like, $1 to what I was offering. And I'll just do that with them until they're just like, fuck you. And, and like, work with me, not against me, Chief. We both know it's zombie debt, but I haven't had to deal with zombie debt in a long time. I learned to just not get in debt anymore.
yeah.
I don't even know, Mike. And you just wrinkle it up and you throw it in the garbage can. You figure this is just, like some hoax. Well, in my letter, it says, please pay me within 30 days. Please respond in 30 days. And if you just wrinkle it up and throw it in the garbage can, I show up 31 days later with the sheriff. And the sheriff will legally take the $1,000 from you. I gave you notice. I told you that you owed me $1,000. I gave you a grace period. I gave you 30 days to respond. Well, you didn't respond, so it must have been true. So your response is always, always respond. If I send you a bill for $1,000, sit down at the typewriter, computer, mail it back going, what? I challenge that. What you can do is refuse without dishonor. You say, I don't owe you anything. Now whose job is it to prove that I gave you some sort of service? It's my job. That's what the IRS does. The IRS sends you a notice. They give you 10 days to respond. If you don't respond, you must be guilty. Don't be afraid of the IRS. Just write them a letter back within the first 10 days. Challenge their authority. Say, no, I don't owe you this money. Prove it. Oh, well, gosh, that's going to be a heck of a lot harder. Gosh, if you want us to prove it, then we're not going to be able to collect the tax.
And
You want evidence?
I also wait till the last day possible.
Shit, I don't.
Like the last
ahead.
minute, and I'll send an email saying, thank you, I have received your email. I am looking into it. And then I do nothing, and I wait till I hear from them again.
Oh, I'm quick. I go in like within the first 3 days, and I already have a series of questions. I'm always like, I'll conditionally accept your offer, whatever it is, if you can first prove or demonstrate that you've suffered a loss. Show me, your documentation where I can see that you've suffered a loss or damage. Blah 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 blah. Show me where I have a contract with you, and all of that stuff. I'm going to make you jump through all the hoops. You know what I'm saying? But you'll have to answer it, because I'm going to give you a time limit, and then I'm going to charge you a late fee, and I'm going to make you send it in certified mail if you want to respond to me, so that it's all on the books, like everything.
Yeah, there's a paper trail.
Fucking A, right?
Yep. Hillary's is still owed $50 gagillion. Gajillion. $50 gajillion.
$50 gajillion.
They didn't
I love him,
dispute his
dude.
demand letter.
I want to steal that $50 gajillion.
The taxes. Good.
More often cause of, okay, we need to audit you to prove it. That's my fear.
What's your Fifth Amendment right? Go ahead, audit. I've got a Fourth Amendment right to be secure in my person's house's papers and effects, and a Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate myself.
Pause.
I've got my checkbook and stuff. I don't have to give.
All right, you hear that? Now think about this for a second. If you've got the Fifth Amendment right to your privacy and your finances and all that shit like that, how do you have a law or a rule? They say it's a law from the IRS that says you have to show us your income, all your dealings, your expenses. Well, how is that? Why do I have to waive my Fifth Amendment for you to do this thing with the IRS? That seems like it would be infringing on my right to privacy, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we have a law here, that's why it's not positive law, the Article 26, the tax code, because it's not constitutional. Not the way they're doing it, because they're invading your privacy. They're forcing you to give them information about your personal shit you wouldn't share with your neighbor.
To enforce an unconstitutional law.
The income tax.
People's income. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So there's several rights being abused there.
Right. But your employer here is making you do it because they're making the employer report. And now he has to
Yeah,
report your earnings, what he's paid you. Now they're going to question you on it. But the thing is, if you answer them, then you're agreeing to give them you're waiving your right. I asked them in my response to them, how is it possible for them to demand me to violate the Fifth Amendment and give them information that I wouldn't give anyone, my personal financial shit, and
yeah.
they couldn't answer that one.
And that's why we in Australia they have a pay-as-you-go system where the employer has to take the tax directly. Well, you never get it. You get the net of your pay. The employer sends the tax off to the tax office or the IRS, the Australian IRS,
They do that here.
and it's automatically reported
Yeah.
when we send the tax off because they know how much tax you paid, so they know that how much you earn.
So the person that's telling on you is your employer. They're the ones that are saying I've paid him this much, and now the tax group is saying, okay, well, we know for sure that you at least made this money. What else? Show us the rest of your stuff. Show us what you did with it. Show us all that. They really want to start getting in your business, and the whole thing is, okay, well, you're just taking his word for it. That's what he paid me. Yeah, but that's not income over what we have in agreement. Like our contract is I work and do this service and he pays me this amount. What the fuck do you guys have to do with it? Like how are you in this contract at all skimming off the top? Like what are they doing?
Yeah. And that's something I'm just writing down. I need to check when we get to the Australian Constitution. I've been told that we didn't have anything written in to protect us from paying taxes. That's on taxes. But I want to check what it actually says. But yeah, I believe that whoever wrote ours had every intention of wanting to tax us. So we don't have that. Not that it's helping you anyway, because you are still made to pay income tax, but you shouldn't be, according to the Constitution, as far as I can understand it.
I don't even have to sign my 1040 form. If I sign it under penalty of perjury, must be true. Well, if I don't sign it, let me see. I don't have to give you, the government, anything that you can use to put me in jail. If I sign my 1040 form and give it to you, can you use that to put me in jail? Yes. Then I don't have to sign it. If you show me, Judge, how I can sign that without giving up my Fifth Amendment rights, then I'll sign it. But they can't do that. Bill Conklin has a website, and he did that, and the judge says, I cannot rule on your case. He didn't say you have a lousy argument. He just said, I can't rule on your case because if I do, it's going to completely flip, the whole economic system. Oh, so my rights are going to be violated because it's going to be embarrassing for you? That's what's going to be happening in a couple weeks when we, bring the IRS. We are doing an IRS audit. Bring in your paperwork. You show us where the law says we've got to pay this cash. Now, I think the IRS is on the way out. The IRS, by its own statistics, say that 1 out of 5 people does not pay taxes. We've stopped volunteering. It's about time. 98%. It took us a while to figure it out.
Is that 1 in 5 that should, or 1 in 5 period, including kids and everybody?
I think I don't know the exact statistics. I think it is 1 out of 5 people that the IRS claims should be. Okay? Because if you go by my statistics, everybody who's paying taxes shouldn't be. So I think the IRS is out to lunch. You don't have to worry about the IRS anymore. What you do have to worry about is what they're going to replace it with. National sales tax? Oh, that's better. We got rid of the lion. We got the tiger. Well, that's stupid.
To save time, you can just give a really short yes or no answer. But is there provision written into the Constitution for what can be taxed?
I don't know. I would have to look at it off the top of my head. I can't think of
Okay.
it right now. That would be in the law in Title 26, I believe, which is still goes into IRS tax code. So I'll have to look at that.
Okay.
You know, which Menendez brother do you want to live with? We've got to make sure that they get rid of the IRS and that they do not institute a national sales tax, because the national sales tax is only 10%. No, 11%. I'm sorry, 12%, 20, 15, you know, it pretty soon before you know it, it's going to be 50. You know, as far as I'm concerned, the only flat tax that I'm in favor of is a flat tax which is 0. So how are we going to operate the United States without an income tax? I don't know. How did we do it before the IRS? July 4th, we got the Declaration of Independence. July 5th, we got the IRS. I don't think so. When did the IRS happen?
1943, they started taking out our checks.
Well, they started taking it out of our checks, but the IRS came into existence in 1913. So between 1776 and 1913, there was no income tax. There was no inflation. Go figure. George Washington paid the same amount of money for a loaf of bread that Abraham Lincoln.
And Halsey wants to know what year it was recorded.
This, I think, 2004, I believe. But could you back that up about 20 seconds? Because that was really interesting.
1943, they started taking out our checks.
Well, they started taking it out of our checks, but the IRS came into existence in 1913. So between 1776 and 1913, there was no income tax. There was no inflation.
Between 1776 and
the founding up to the 1913. Like at no point up until 1913 had there been an income tax. And then in 1913, we decided to do that.
Where did the government get its money?
People will pay for programs that they want.
And that was happening?
Yeah. How the fuck do you think they got around and shit?
How is there an argument?
Because people forgot. People forgot that we didn't always have income tax. There were other ways to get things done, like having good ideas that you didn't have to force people to pay for.
Yeah. And do you have a percentage? I know there's like brackets.
Graduated, yeah.
Our lowest, right, is 18%.
Right,
So
I don't know all of them.
Once you reach the bracket to pay tax, you will pay 18% of your fucking income.
Probably it discourages people from reaching that point. They're like, man, shit, I'm not going to take that raise.
That's right. A lot of people do stay under the tax-free threshold, which is only like 20 grand. So you're living like in poverty, basically, but
not reporting and working under the table.
Well, yeah, which is why they want to get rid of cash. One of the reasons.
Go figure. George Washington paid the same amount of money for a loaf of bread that Abraham Lincoln did. No inflation. So then what's Alan Greenspan talking about? You have to have 5% inflation every year. I'll get into more of that a little bit later. I want to get So we've got the United States Code, which is congressional statute, but you actually have to read it, and not all of it applies to you. The other stuff is the Uniform Commercial Code, which is private law. It's a copyright. Can you use somebody else's book without their permission? No. Can you use somebody else's law without their permission? No. How do you get permission? Become a lawyer. When you become a member of the bar, then you get permission to execute their code. Now, I've also got a site here on the internet where you can go and download the Uniform Commercial Code for $5. you can't afford not to download it. You need to have that so that you can go and reference this stuff. You start reading it, it's like they've got it in writing. And you go, I can't believe it's in print. But it is, it's law. It is a law, and you volunteer into it. How do you volunteer into the Uniform Commercial Code? Anybody spend these? Anybody recognize this? What is this?
It's a note.
It's a note. Every time you spend one of these, you are automatically de facto under Uniform Commercial Code.
Dollar.
Now, what is common law? Common law is based on property or land. Now, when you are under property, your economy is quid pro quo. That is Latin, which means something for something. You gave me silver, which is something I gave you a book. That's quid pro quo. If I give you, you have an apple, and I want to buy your apple, and I say, well, I don't have any money on my, would you take an IOU? You go, well, okay, yeah, you look like a good guy. And you give me the apple, and I give you the IOU. Have we completed the transaction? No. Have I given you anything? Well, nothing of any value. All I've given you is a promise to pay. So that transaction is still open. And that's what's happened when you use these notes. If you are under...
So how do amendments work? Well,
You mean making changes to the Constitution?
Should I know that before this, or will he
Let's save the amendment part for now. Let's just get through what this fiat currency is he's talking about. He's talking about.
I just wanted to jump in and say, Sam was asking about how money, how we paid for stuff before. There was also excise and taxes, so like customs. So if you wanted to import tea, then you'd have to pay for like a luxury tax. And then that's what actually our first war after our war for independence was the Whiskey Rebellion. The same guys that had fought to not pay taxes against England under Washington then went out and said, gotta pay the whiskey tax.
Yeah, okay.
Well, howdy, Hillary's.
Welcome, sir. Thank you for joining. We have we've made it nearly. It's only got 11 minutes left. So
excellent.
I've tried to limit my questions. I've written them down.
You are not under common law because it's not quid pro quo. You are automatically under the Uniform Commercial Code.
So I have complete transferability of that note.
No, not at all.
Okay.
And we're going to get into that in a little bit more
If
detail.
you buy property and you say, I want your property, and they're willing to take Federal Reserve notes.
So if we don't use money, they can't tax us but don't they assess you as well, like on your belongings?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
So what he's saying here is, as soon as I use $1, I'm under the UCC.
You're purchasing something with an IOU.
If you have any personal property, then they can assess you property taxes for that too, Sam. Yeah. But then they have the burden to prove, how much your property's worth. And then you can always go back and say, yeah, but it's not really worth that much, though.
Yeah, okay.
And how do they have access to your belongings anyway? Do they have some sort of writ that they can come in and observe?
Yeah. And so if we barter with each other, then essentially they shouldn't be able to touch us other than try and get us the property tax.
Right.
Yeah, you're taking them out of the picture when you barter. You're removing the use of their currency, which is you're making them a party when you use their IOU, their note, because it's not actual money. It's not gold or silver, because that's what the Constitution requires to be lawful money to pay debt. You can't pay debts with an IOU.
Yeah.
A debt-based currency doesn't pay debts off.
Fucking fascinating.
Bird notes is that.
Well, that's why you never own it.
No, but they're willing to take those.
Well, you're not giving them
They're
anything.
willing to take
You are
them.
not
Right.
giving them anything. You cannot go into a common law court because you did not give anything of substance. When you get your manufacturer statement of origin, I would give them silver.
When I bought
Or-
my property.
I know what you're telling me.
They said, great, it's yours.
But you didn't buy your property. You don't own it in a loyal title.
You know,
You don't own it.
$21 silver plus that on it.
We'll talk a little bit more about it when we get to the Federal Reserve. I mean, that's a whole special topic. Any questions on Article 3 and the different classes of law?
I do have a question. On page 17, your definition of positive law.
Yes?
Now, when I was researching that recently, I understood positive laws to be all those laws that have been reviewed in the code, that they're as close and complete as the statute was, so they're considered positive law.
Okay.
However, not all of the code has been researched and can be said that they're complete with the statute.
Okay.
Okay, so those are not positive law.
Okay.
Didn't have anything to do with who they applied to.
Okay.
Which, when I read this definition,
Well, I'd like to see your definition because I'm always willing to learn. I mean, there's stuff that I could be telling you that's wrong. I'm not deliberately giving you any bad information. I just don't know everything.
well, like you have this definition here about a positive law title.
Well, I've gotten that
Is
out
that your
of
definition?
I've gotten it out of Black's. The top part is Black's law. The bottom part is my interpretation and
Okay.
understanding of it.
So you're saying that you understand it that the statutes have been repealed,
No, a statute is law.
right?
Code is a reflection of the statute.
Well, that's why it's crime of faith.
Right.
It's not exact.
It's not exactly. And so whatever the code says, you got to trace that back to the actual statute. Now, the United States Code is statute. Now, all of the titles are statute law. It's not
That way.
code,
You have to have an enabling clause and an effective date.
Right.
Positive law.
okay? But there is a difference between, whatever the difference is, there are differences and not all of the titles apply, are like positive law. So your definition, I mean, I don't know how I would interpret that. How does that apply to
So
me?
like in Title 26, they have, whoever, and I did read who they've empowered to go through and research this, has not gone through all of Title 26 and can say that each section accurately reflects the statute that was passed.
Now, what is the statute?
But see, when you look through the code, because it's not positive law, to really know what the law is, you have to go to the statute.
It has no enabling.
I'm asking you, what is the statute?
But sections of the code reflect statutes, different statutes.
Supposed to.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's a reflection. So
Right.
I've got Title 26, which is United States Code. Where do I go for the statute? What
So
is that?
It's a compilation of several statutes, lots of statutes that have been passed over time. They categorize all of the tax codes in Title 26.
Okay.
All the different statutes over all the different years just get
Okay.
categorized in Title 26.
Well, I'll research that. I'll research that a little bit deeper.
Yeah, Michael, I'm not sure, and I'm not trying to speak for Renee, but I read the same thing. And where I got the information, I was on one of the legal websites that ties into the government site where the US code is listed.
Mhm.
And this was it contained in some general
I
information
think that's
on one,
probably where I read,
Yeah,
I read a lot of those.
it was on one of the general information screens that you go to before you get into, the Title 26 and Title 27.
I'll go and research that a little bit more because I've never heard that information before. Most people I know don't even know that the United States Code exists.
So that's why, like, when they refer to codes in some lawsuits,
Yeah.
if it's already positive law, then there's really no sense in going and looking at each individual statute.
Right.
I've already proven it's
Okay.
accurate.
I mean, that sounds plausible. I'll check into that. Thank you. That was Article 3. Why don't we take a quick break, and then we'll come back and pick up with Article 4, because that's going to be a long one.
Hey, you did it.
Yeah. I just
Someone
had
in
to
the
stop
books.
asking questions. But I would like you to address this one. Since this was recorded almost 20 years ago, do you feel like his predictions came true?
Prediction.
Well, I thought that as soon as I read it. I guess
about the IRS.
What he
Go ahead and
said,
start the after hang, and then we can address all it because I know Pixie wants to come
yeah,
in.
good
OD.
idea actually.
So we'll close this one down, and then we can do a new link for your after show.
And I got some
Oh,
good advice from somebody that YouTube will only push videos under 2 hours. So if you want YouTube to be friendly and suggest your content,
all right. Well, don't
they
forget
say keep it under.
in the after hang to do your Dietrich Bonhoeffer and the your birthday thing if you wanted to show that.
Cool. So
Close us out.
well, I'll start the next one so I can share details before we end it.
Oh, that makes sense.
What's his last name? Badnarik. Badnarik. Giving links. Oh, we lost him.
Who?
Will.
Oh. I don't know how it's spelled. That's why I didn't answer.
There is the link for StreamYard peeps. Me and you can just go and ahead and jump over there. I'll end this. I should probably make it go live so that I can get a YouTube link for those who don't want to join the stream. Hopefully Will comes back. I had a few questions for him as well. I think next week I will have the after party all set ready to go, so I don't have to do this live. All right, here is the YouTube link for the after party. Head over there, guys, with your questions. And we'll see you over there. Thanks very much for coming. Thanks for your participation. And with that, I shall